Liability explicit or implied shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to another Ask the Experts, where we bring you the top experts in their field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Have we got a show for you today? You know, taxes are not the greatest thing to talk about, but when you have somebody who knows the tax law, who knows how to deal with the IRS, remember all these 87,000 new agents that are coming on? Hey, you better have somebody representing you. Don't try to do this yourself. Sit back. If you've got a friend or a relative, it doesn't even matter where they live, that is having problems with the IRS. They've gotten behind, anything that could possibly go wrong with the IRS. You want to let them know to watch or listen to today's show. And we were so, this is the only way to say it, we were so blessed to find one of the finest tax relief attorneys in the U.S. And he's been doing radio for a long time. So he's going to outdo me today, but let's welcome our expert, Stephen Moskowitz. Good afternoon, Stephen.
Thanks, Steve. And we're on the same team, so nobody has to outdo anybody. And I love talking about taxes. And one of the reasons is, take a look at the big corporations like the Fortune 500. They make a ton of money, obviously way more than mom and pop on the corner, but they pay less in taxes. And there's all kinds of taxes. And the first show we did together, we talked about all kinds of ways to save taxes. We scratched the surface. But today we're going to talk about a very common problem. What happens if I can't pay my taxes? And there's all types of taxes.
Is that really common, Stephen?
Extremely common. Extremely common.
Well, I want you, before we get started, I just want to tell you, we got a letter from a listener, first of all, who loves the show, but he wants to know if on our next show, if we can talk more about businesses.
I would love to do that. And the majority of our clients are business people.
Good. We'll do that on our next show.
That gives somebody a reason to tune in.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I got to tell you, we're getting new people tuning in every day. Tell people who Stephen Moskowitz is and about what you do.
So I'm a tax attorney. And before I was a tax attorney, I was a CPA. I had our law firm. And we do everything in tax, from tax return preparation, tax planning, accounting, making deals with the IRS when you can't pay your taxes. That's why so many years ago, I took the telephone number 888 tax deal, because that's what we do all day long. We make tax deals, audits, ERC, which is employee retention credit, which, today is January 23rd, 2004. And ERC was supposed to finally end next year. The 2020 year was going to end on April 15th of this year, 2024, and the 21 year was due to, and normal statute of limitations, April 15th next year, 2025. Last week, January 16th, the bipartisan tax committee of Congress said they thought it would be a good idea to end it next Wednesday, January 31st. So it hasn't become law yet, but we're all scrambling now, because if it does become law, we have to hurry up and file everything by next week that we had till next year to file. So there's all kinds of things. We have to keep on top of it. And another section that we deal with is called collection or resolution. That's when people can't pay their taxes. And you know what? This happens in all walks of life. Because you ask about my credentials, And I told you that I'm a tax attorney. Before I was a tax attorney, I was a CPA. And I live here in California now. But I used to live in New York City. And I had a very prestigious job in New York City in transportation. I was a New York City taxi cab driver. So
No,
I'm
I
just,
can't believe that. I don't see that.
well, let me tell you, I still remembered it. And one of my little jokes is, did I learn more driving the cab or in law school? And I feel it's a toss up, depends which day you ask me. But there's a lot of skills that were transferable, like listening. When you drive a cab in New York City, people will really talk to you. You know why? Because people get in your cab, and a lot of people don't have anybody to talk to. And you get to talk to somebody, you have their full attention, and you know you're never going to see him again. It's not like you confess your sins to your next door neighbor and you say, oh, I'm not going to see this guy, or a family member, oh, I have to see him at Thanksgiving. You're never going to see this guy. So people, open up the art of listening. And that's a very important part. The first thing that I do when I talk to a client, my first duty is I listen to him. What's his story? What's his facts and circumstances? And I'm real life. I came from nothing. So I'm not some holier than thou guy who says, well, rule number 1, 2, 3, 4 says you must do this and the penalty for not doing it and scare. Look, it's like most business owners. I can give you the perfect scenario of what you should do. But if everybody did what they should do, there'd be no work for lawyers. And what we have here is real life. And, a lot of times you talk to a lot of small business owners, you know what they call payroll? They talk about the miracle of payroll, making the payroll. And people have problems. And that's what we're going to talk about today, if you can't pay your taxes. And that's true if it's income taxes. That's true if it's payroll taxes. And there's other taxes too. So the first thing is, if you can't pay your taxes, you're not an axe murderer. Don't hide. You're not a bad person. You just can't pay your taxes. But don't stick your head in the sand, because all the new agents you've been talking about from the IRS,
Yeah.
want them coming in, ruining your life, your business, your marriage, the whole works. We can work out.
Stephen, I wanted to ask you, how do people feel when they come into your office knowing that they're behind on their taxes?
The very best way is if you could sit in my reception area, because you'd see people coming in, hang down and head down, and they feel just the weight of the world on the shoulder, and they're coming out,
Right.
hey, everything's going to be okay. And, usually most of the time it is. Usually the stuff that you worry about, unless you really go to some extremes, isn't going to happen to you. And the bottom line is, that's why so many years ago I took the number 888 tax deal, because that's what we do. So don't stick your head in the sand. Don't wait for some IRS agent to clean out your bank account or seize your property, or go to your customers, clients, patients and say, don't pay John Smith, pay IRS, because that'll ruin your business. Your clients don't want to know you if they think you can't
Right.
pay your taxes. They're going to say, well, if you can't handle your own stuff, how are you going to handle mine? And they figure you're not going to be around for very long. Or if the IRS is seizing all your money, how are you going to be in business? So the bottom line is, you just come and talk to us. And one of the nice things about talking to an attorney is we have an attorney-client privilege. So you don't have to worry about what you're going to tell me, because sometimes what the IRS does with CPAs is, and they're doing this more and more, they go to the CPA and say, okay, Mr. or Ms. CPA, tell IRS everything what your client told you, everything you told him, give us all the documents. With an attorney, they can't do that. We have attorney-client privilege. So that means if you say, you didn't pay your taxes, and while you're here in the office like a doctor, you also murdered your next door neighbor and you buried his body under the old oak tree. By law, that's a safe secret. And that's also true if you tell the receptionist or anybody that works for me, because anybody that works for the lawyer shares in the privilege. That's a big deal. So you don't have to worry, well, what can I tell the lawyer? That is a problem with a CPA. So we listen to you, we hear your story. And it's especially true with business owners. Because if you're an employee, your employer is supposed to withhold taxes from you. Now, sometimes employees don't have that done. Sometimes they claim too many exemptions, or they go exempt, or people say, well, they needed the money, so they make an adjustment and they don't have enough withheld. Or sometimes people are employees, but they are treated as independent contractors and nothing is withheld. And those things happen. But for most employees, it's easier because most employees do have taxes withheld. But business people really have more of a challenge here because most business people, their income every month is different. One month it can be beaucoup. The next month it's starvation city. And the next day, you really don't know what's coming in or not. So, how do you deal with this? So, what happens is what we do is we go ahead and make a deal for you with the IRS. Now, when you think about the IRS, the IRS is not some monolith. And that's how people, some monolith, some institution. The IRS building does not make any decisions. Some human being makes a decision. And having represented people against the IRS for all these years, you take a look at a large group. Yes, if you look at a large group of any profession, doctors, lawyers, piano tuners, whatever, if you look at the margins, there's always somebody that's going to be really mean, and there's always going to be somebody that's really nice. But most people are somewhere in the middle, treat you the way you treat them, and they're just doing their jobs. So basically, and for the most part, if you work with the IRS person, they're going to work with you and work out a deal that you can live with. The IRS really doesn't want to see you go out of business because if you do, you'll never pay them back. And going even further, then you go on government support. So usually they want to work with you. Usually we can make a deal. Now, where we give you a lot of added value is determining, well, just how much do you really need to live? Because there's all kinds of guidelines, but a lot of times we ask for exceptions to that. So you say, well, okay, Steve, I'm sitting back here, I'm listening to you, and that's just fine if I get a nice, decent guy. But what if I get a guy that he's really mean and he's being so unfair with me, and I can't live with what he's talking about? What do we do? So if I was representing you and that was the guy, what would I do in that situation? I'd say to the IRS agent, okay, you're too tough for me. And then I go right over his head. And usually, as you move up the chain, the people are more experienced and more reasonable. And as you continue to go up, that becomes more so. And it would be the very rare instance where everybody in the chain was unreasonable, because there's a lot of people in the chain, and we can go over that later.
What
But
about the 87,000 new agents? Do you think that they're going to be more difficult to work with?
so here's the problem. I wouldn't say more difficult to work with, but like anybody that's new with anything, they're more by the rule book and they're not experienced. And whenever you're dealing with an inexperienced person in any area, doctor, piano tuner, etc., it's more difficult because they don't know how things really work.
But you know more about the tax laws than a lot of them do, though.
That's okay. I'm happy to educate them. And but that's really true. You know, when you work with somebody, even when you're doing something with another attorney, part of the process is you educate each other. So, well, look, here's my case, here's my facts, here's what supports me, and here's why I'm going to win and beat you unless you make a deal with me. And yes, President Biden, when he said that he wanted to hire these 87,000 new IRS agents, specifically said, like any business person would, for every dollar he invests in the IRS, he expects multiple dollars back. So now you have all these people who have a lot of power, but they're inexperienced, who are chasing after people. And one of the areas they're chasing after is the area that we're talking about today. People that just don't pay their taxes because the government believes there's a tremendous number of people that just don't pay. And they've been getting away with it for years. So the bottom line is, yes, that's going to affect things, but that's okay. We're here to represent the taxpayer. And another thing that happens all the time, somebody will call up and say, oh my God, look at this bill. And, I say call up, but prior to the pandemic, most of the clients, we have clients all over the world, all over the United States and in foreign countries too. But prior to the pandemic, Most clients physically came into the office here in California and we sat down and talked. Now we do things remotely, so it really doesn't matter whether you're in San Francisco or LA or Houston, Texas, or Maine or Hawaii, or I could start naming a bunch of cities in the country, but you get the idea. And you say, by the way, well, wait a minute, Steve, you're an attorney in California, and what if I'm here in another state? I'm here in whatever state you're in. The answer to that is this. The IRS recognizes an attorney of any state. So I could go into the IRS office in any state in the union and I'm recognized as an attorney. You say, well, that's terrific, but what if I'm in real serious heavy duty situation and I have to go to the tax court? You know, the lawyer should really be familiar with the judges. And if you come out here to, you know, you name the state, gee, all these judges are going to be strange to you, right? Wrong. Do you know for the entire 50 states, there's only 19 presidentially appointed tax court judges? You say, wait a minute, 19 people, 50, how does that work? The answer is they literally travel around the country. So the same judges we would appear before here in California, if we went to your state, we would appear before them as well. But usually, even before the pandemic, when dealing with the government, most of the time we deal with the IRS person on the phone. And it just today, it really doesn't matter where you're located because very few times you actually physically have to go into an office. If you do, sure, we will, but most of the time you don't. But anyway, something
How
that's
do you
really,
get through to them, Stephen?
so that comes up all the time because people say, you know, I called and called and called and called and nobody answered the phone. How do you get through to them?
Right.
Professionals have numbers just available to professionals.
Oh, okay.
And then if it's an agent that we have a history with, we probably have exchanged cell phone numbers too to make it even easier. But again, the starting point is we use the professional line, which is only available to professionals, not to the general public. That's the secret of how do we get through to them when you can't. Because when you look at the newspaper, according to admissions by the IRS, they just don't answer the phone most of the times when you call. So that's not a problem. But suppose this happened, really common. Somebody calls up and says, I just got this bill for $1 zillion and I don't think I owe it. So is this the infallible IRS? Because they sent you a bill for $1 zillion. So if they said $1 zillion, it must be $1 zillion, right? Wrong. Everybody makes mistakes. The IRS makes plenty of them too. So the first thing we do is when somebody gives us a bill, even if they don't challenge it, even if somebody says, well, I got this bill and the bill's for, $3 zillion, we say, well, okay, wait a minute. We determine, do you really owe the $3 zillion or not? If you don't, we go there and say, hi, you sent my client a bill for $3 zillion. He doesn't owe $3 zillion. As a matter of fact, he owes nothing. And please correct your records. Or you send him a bill for $3 zillion and he really owes, $59. So let's bring the bill down to 59 and then we'll tell you what we're going to do about the 59. That is very common. And another thing you have to remember is that IRS agent is not judge, jury, or executioner. If we get along with the agent, and most of the time we do, again, we're regular people deal with regular people. Most of the time we can work something out. But there is always that exceptional time when you can't. Somebody doesn't understand, they're unreasonable, whatever. That's okay. There's a very good avenue to go over the person's head, but you have to know how to do it. Like everything else in life. I'm not pretending I know how to do dentistry because I don't. You have a toothache, see a dentist. So the bottom line is the first thing we do is we examine the bill, and there's all kinds of reasons why a bill would be wrong. So one of them is what's also very common, a very common mistake people make, is that they don't file a tax return because they know they owe money, and they say, well, they don't have the money, so they won't file the return. And then year two comes around, and they say, well, they still don't have the money for year one, and they're going to owe for year two, and how can they file year two, and they didn't file year one, and then all becomes lifestyle, 5 years, 10 years. All these new IRS agents, and that's so common, by the way, all these new IRS agents are chasing after people in that situation. It's kind of like a
Hey, let
combo.
me ask you something. What is it like? I want to back up just a minute. When they come into your office or Zoom in or whatever, and they sign with you for power of attorney, what is that like?
So that's routine. These are limited powers of attorney, not general powers of attorney. So here's what that means. The only thing that we can do is deal with the IRS for you, or the state if you're in a state that taxes. It's not like a general power of attorney. So I can't go to the bank and say, hi, I'm here to withdraw all the money, or go to the local Lamborghini dealer and say, hi, I'd like to get your best Lamborghini and just change it, just charge it to my best friend over here. It's a limited power of attorney where
So
we can
tell
only deal with the IRS.
people what happens when they try to talk to the IRS themselves.
The same thing as if you were the local town tough guy and you get in a boxing ring with a professional heavyweight boxer.
Good analogy.
Nobody but another heavyweight boxer better get in that ring. And if you think it in fairness to everybody, I've dedicated my entire career to this. I went to school for a long time. I practiced for a long time. This is my professional life. Just like, a surgeon, his or her professional life is doing the surgery. And almost all surgeons specialize in a certain part of the body. The surgeon that, would operate up here wouldn't operate over here. So the bottom line is the IRS person's like that too. They've devoted their career to tax. I wouldn't expect anybody outside of that to be able to compete in this area. Just like I would never try to talk to a medical doctor and say, I know more medicine than you do. Well, of course I don't. Or anything, or an architect or a contractor. I don't know how to draw plans for a building, but that's why you go to an architect. It goes back hundreds of years. Adam Smith's specialization of labor. This is what I know how to do. This is what I like to do. And
So what do you do when somebody walks in your office and they tell you they have been talking to the IRS themselves for the last 3 months?
I say, you've had your last conversation.
Yes.
Think of it like this. It's like if you need an operation and you say to the surgeon, you can give me a painkiller, but don't put me to sleep. I'll help you with the operation. The surgeon says, there's nothing you can do to help me. And boy, is there a lot that you can do to hamper the operation because, you see that big knife coming towards your body and you jump out of the way. Well, that's really bad if I'm doing surgery on you. So
It must be a big load off someone's back once they sign with you and they don't have to talk to
well,
the
that's
IRS
something that
anymore.
I've talked about on the radio here because I represent a lot of media people too. And they would come into my office, and especially if they're on the radio, as you know, I've done TV and radio for a lot of years.
Yes.
If a TV person is in the office, most people recognize him because they see him. But if a radio person is in the office, they may have listened to him or her for years, but they don't know what they look like. So they're just sitting there. And what numerous radio people have talked about on air after sitting in my office say, just like I told you earlier, I saw these long faces coming in and I saw these happy faces going out. Of
Yes.
course, really. Think of it like this. Suppose that, God forbid, you have chest pains and you're really, really worried you're going to have a heart attack and you're scared to death. And you go in the cardiologist's office and the cardiologist says, those double bean burritos that you have every day for breakfast? It's gas. It's not a heart attack. You're really going to be okay. Imagine the relief you would have. And that's what you have here because we're going to take care of you. And basically what we do is we do everything for you. You don't have to talk to the IRS. We want to go ahead and do everything for you. We don't want you to have anything to do with them. So we don't want you to talk to them, deal with them, have anything to do with them. This is our job. We'll do it for you. Then we'll discuss everything with you. We'll set a deal and you're going to be fine. This is what we do for a living. This is what we've done for years. And it's a tremendous relief off of it. Just like going to that medical doctor that says, that horrible disease you thought you had? You don't. It's something simple. Take this pill and you'll be fine in a week.
I like the way you make people feel at ease. The fact is, you've got so many elements in your bag. Everybody's different, but it's so nice how you make people feel that, what, we're going to get this taken care of. And I got to tell you, to me, you're so worth your weight in gold. It's just amazing, and people can feel that and hear that when they're listening to the show.
Well, thanks. And basically, when I started my practice so many years ago, basic, simple golden rule. I was thinking, if I was sitting in a doctor's office and I was worried about some medical problem, how would I want that medical doctor to treat me? Now, first thing I'd want him or her to do is speak in normal English. Don't use those giant medical words that he knows that I don't know to impress me about how smart he is. It's not a question of how smart he is. Explain it in language that I can understand. So basically, I'd like to think I'm a really good communicator. All the years I've spent on TV and radio, I can explain things to people. I explain the situation in simple English, what we're going to do in simple English, and then I take care of it. Just like if you needed a bypass operation where the doctor would explain, okay, I'm going to take a vein out of your leg, I'm going to sew it into your chest, the blood's going to flow the way it should, and you'll be fine. Yeah, there's more to it than that. I'm sure the medical school version of that is a lot more complex. But as the patient, that's basically all you need to know. And that's understandable. And that's what we do. And I also understand, as back when I was a law professor, that I would tell the new attorneys, I said, look, the law professor was many years ago too, before I really got heavily involved in the practice, or as I was building the practice, I was professor at night. But I'd say, look, the law is not a bunch of dusty old law books. The law lives, it laughs, it cries, it bleeds, it screams, it's happy, it's sad. You have people's lives in your hands. You better respect that and treat it accordingly. And every time I deal with a new client, I understand that person has entrusted his or her life to me. And your financial life affects so much more. For example, the number one cause of divorce is financial problems. So when somebody comes in, it really is a confessional when you talk to me. And a lot of times people will say, oh, they kind of list out their problems. And one of the problems is they have marital problems. And I say, is there anything other than the finances? Because basically that's taxes, you don't have enough money. And then what happens is we fix that. You relieve the problem that was causing the stress on the marriage. Now the marriage goes back to happy, normal. The person goes back to work. They don't lay in bed all night staring at the ceiling, envisioning some IRS agents coming to get them the next day. It's people's lives, and it's their families' lives and their kids' lives. I understand the importance of that, and that's how we treat it.
Well, as always, this show goes by so fast. And I promise everybody, the next show we do, which we will be announcing, we'll talk more about business. But now give everybody your phone number and your website.
You can call us toll free at 888 tax deal. That's 888 TAXDEAL, 888 tax deal, or visit us online at moskowitzllp.com, MOSKOWITZLLP.com.
And just remember, if you have a relative or a friend who's experiencing problems with the IRS, doesn't matter what part of the country they're in, we're talking about federal taxes. They can also give Stephen a call. Stephen, love doing the show with you.
I love it
makes
too.
my job so easy. And we'll see you next time.
I look forward to it. It's great fun for me too. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
bud. And that's attorney Stephen Moskowitz. I mean, he blew me away on our first show that we did. He's been doing TV and radio. It's very obvious for a long time, but he's really, really good at what he does. And, if you weren't able to write the number down, just give us a call here at 954-336-3767, and we'll get that phone number out to you right away. Hey, that's it for us today. We'll be back with you again next week. Everybody stay warm. Have a wonderful week. God bless everybody.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.